The call came on a Tuesday morning, and I almost didn't answer it. I was in the backyard, pulling weeds around the base of the oak tree. My wife and I had planted the year we bought the house. 31 years ago. The tree was taller than the house now. My wife wasn't around to see it anymore, and most days I tried not to think about that too hard. My phone buzzed on the patio table. I recognized the number, my daughter-in-law's cell, and I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. Not fear exactly, more like the feeling you get when you see storm clouds moving in and you've left the windows open. I answered. "The mortgage payment bounced," she said. "No hello. No how are you. Just that. We need you to transfer the money before end of business today, or there's going to be a late fee." I set down my trowel. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "The mortgage payment on which property?" A pause. "The condo, obviously." I stood up, knees aching, and looked at the oak tree for a long moment. "I'll look into it," I said. I hung up and sat down in the patio chair my son had given me for Father's Day 3 years ago, back when he still remembered Father's Day, and I thought about everything that had brought me to that phone call. 34 years of working in commercial real estate, first as an agent, then as a broker, then eventually owning a small portfolio of properties across southern Ontario. I'd built it from nothing. My parents came over from Scotland with almost nothing. My father worked construction his whole life, and I swore I'd do better. I did. I wasn't a rich man by Bay Street standards, but I was comfortable. Comfortable enough that when my son was born, I made myself a quiet promise that he'd never want for anything the way I sometimes had as a kid. That promise cost me more than I understood at the time. My son's name is Nolan. He's 31 years old. In those 31 years, he has held a job for a grand total of 7 months, a summer position at a hardware store when he was 19, which he quit because, as he explained it, the manager had it out for him. Since then, he'd had ideas, plans, a clothing brand that never launched, a podcast that recorded 3 episodes, a drop-shipping business that lost $1,200 in the first month, each time I funded it, each time I told myself it was an investment in his future. Each time the whole thing quietly dissolved and Nolan moved on to the next idea, without ever acknowledging what the last one had cost. His mother, God rest her, used to say I was too soft with him. She said it gently, the way she said most things, but she said it. She passed 6 years ago, breast cancer, 18 months from diagnosis to the end, and after that I think I got even softer. Grief does that to some people. Makes you hold the ones who are left a little too tight, give a little too much, because you're terrified of losing anyone else. When Nolan was 27, he met a woman through a mutual friend. Her name was Kelly, spelled with an E at the end, which she mentioned often and seemed to consider a personality trait. She was from a well-off family in Oakville. Her father ran an import business. They had a large house, European vacations, the whole picture. I met Kelly twice in the first year Nolan was dating her, and both times she was polite in the way that certain people are polite in the way that certain people are polite. Efficiently, minimally, like they're meeting a quota. Nolan seemed happy, though, and I wanted him to be happy. When they decided to move in together, Nolan came to me. He'd found a condo in Burlington, nice building, 2 bedrooms, underground parking, rooftop terrace, the kind of place young professionals live. Nolan was not a young professional, but I didn't say that. The unit was listed at $479,000. He asked if I could help with the down payment. I put in $95,000. My brother, a retired electrician named Stewart, who has always had more common sense than me, told me I was out of my mind. I told him I knew what I was doing. I did not know what I was doing. After the down payment came the monthly support. The mortgage was manageable on its own, but there were condo fees, property taxes, groceries, Nolan's business expenses, Kelly's gym membership that she'd somehow made my financial responsibility, restaurants, streaming services, a weekend trip to Montreal for their anniversary that Nolan mentioned the night before and asked me to cover. I kept a rough mental tally for a while. Then I stopped keeping the tally because looking at the number made it hard to sleep. I want to be honest here. I never asked them to pay me back. I told myself I was helping. I told myself that's what fathers do. But somewhere underneath all of that, I think I also knew that the money was the thing that kept Nolan calling, kept him coming over for dinner once a month, kept him texting me. I'm not proud of that realization. It took me a long time to arrive at it. About 8 months ago, Nolan called me to ask about a ring. He'd been with Kelly for almost 3 years at that point. He said he wanted to propose, and he'd found the ring she'd been hinting at. He described it to me in detail, the cut, the setting, the carat weight. I'm not a jewelry person. I listened. Then he told me the price. $42,000? I was quiet for a moment. That's a significant ring, I said. She knows what she wants, Nolan said, and he laughed, like that settled it. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it for a week, and then I transferred the money, telling myself it was a one-time thing. Telling myself a wedding would make him grow up, telling myself a lot of things I'd been telling myself for years. My brother called me when he found out. You bought a $42,000 ring for a woman who's never once asked how you doing, he said. She asks how I'm doing, I said. Stuart was quiet for a beat. When? I didn't have an answer. After the engagement, Nolan and Kelly started talking about the wedding, or rather, Kelly started talking about the wedding, and Nolan relayed the information to me in the form of financial requests, the venue deposit, the catering quote, the photographer who did editorial-style work and charged accordingly. I told Nolan we needed to sit down and talk about a realistic budget. He said they were working on it. 3 months passed. The requests kept coming piecemeal, a few thousand here, a few thousand there, and I kept approving them because every time I hesitated, Nolan would say something like, I just want to give her a good start, and I would feel guilty for hesitating. Kelly's parents, as far as I could tell, contributed nothing. When I asked Nolan about this once, carefully, diplomatically, he said they had offered in other ways. I never found out what that meant. That spring, Nolan told me they were going to do a smaller ceremony. Intimate, he said, just close family and friends, maybe 40 or 50 people. He said they'd found a venue outside the city, a historic property with a barn and gardens and a lake view. He mentioned a date in July. I said I'd be there. I bought a new suit, dark navy, not flashy, but presentable. My brother picked me up that July morning and we drove out together. Stuart in his good blazer, me in the navy suit, and we were about an hour from the venue when Nolan called me. I answered on the car's Bluetooth. Hey, he said. There was an odd flatness to his voice, something rehearsed. We're on our way, I said. Should be there in under an hour, depending on the 401. A pause. Yeah, so there's been a change in the plan. The ceremony ended up being really small, like immediate family only. Kelly's family. We kept it tight. I didn't say anything. It was just, the venue had a capacity thing, and we didn't want it to feel crowded, and you know how it goes. I looked at Stuart. He was staring at the highway ahead of him with the expression of a man who is choosing, with great effort, not to say I told you so. So the wedding is today, I said. Yes, yeah. And my brother and I aren't invited. It's not like that. It's just Nolan. I said his name once, quietly, and let the silence sit there. He filled it eventually. I know it's not ideal. We'll celebrate with you separately, I promise. Dinner, whatever you want." I told him to enjoy his day. I hung up. Stuart took the next exit and we stopped at a Tim Hortons near a town I won't name and sat in the parking lot with our coffees and didn't say much. Stuart put his hand on my shoulder once, briefly, the way men our age do, and that was enough. We drove home. I sat in my house that evening, my quiet house with its oak tree in the backyard and its empty second bedroom and its framed photo of my wife on the mantel, and something shifted in me. I don't mean I had some dramatic realization. It was quieter than that. It was more like a long, slow breath finally let out, like something I'd been carrying for a very long time had just slipped off without asking permission. I didn't call Nolan that night. 3 days later, the call came from Kelly, the one about the mortgage payment bouncing. I sat in the patio chair and thought about that call for a long time. Then I went inside and phoned my brother. "I need the name of your lawyer," I said. Stuart gave me the name without asking why. He's good like that. Her name was Miss Nakamura, a sharp, quietly formidable woman who specialized in real estate and family financial disputes. I met with her the following Monday morning. I laid everything out. The $95,000 down payment, the years of monthly support, the ring, the wedding contributions, all of it documented in my bank records. I told her about the phone call from Kelly. I told her about the being turned away from the wedding. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she looked at her notes and said, "And your name is on the title?" "It is," I said. "I insisted on that when I put in the down payment. The mortgage is in Nolan's name, but I'm on the title as a co-owner." She nodded slowly. "That gives us something to work with." We spent the next 2 weeks putting things in order. The mortgage payment I had not made and did not intend to make. Under the co-ownership agreement, there were provisions for what happened if one party failed to maintain their financial obligations. Ms. Nakamura drafted a formal notice, sent through proper channels, outlining the situation. Nolan called me the day it arrived. "What is this?" he said, and his voice had a quality I hadn't heard before, something younger than 31. "It's a legal notice," I said. "I'm sure it explains itself." Are you serious right now? We just got married." "I know," I said. "I wasn't there." A long silence. Dad. "I've been thinking about something," I said. "I've been thinking about what it means to help someone, because I thought I was helping you. All these years, I thought I was giving you opportunities, but I think what I actually did was make it very easy for you to never build anything yourself. And that's on me as much as it's on you. But I can't keep doing it. It isn't good for either of us." He told me I was being dramatic. He said Kelly's parents were furious. I found this interesting since they'd apparently contributed nothing to any of this. He said I was ruining the start of his marriage. He said he needed more time. I said, "You have 30 days to make alternative arrangements as outlined in the notice." And then I said something I had never said to my son in 31 years of saying yes to almost everything. I said, "I love you, but I'm done." I hung up. I don't know if he believed me. I don't think he did, not at first. Over the next few weeks, he texted. Kelly texted, which was notable because in 4 years, she had never once initiated contact with me for any reason other than money. They were angry texts initially, then a few that tried a softer approach, then a long message from Kelly that opened with, "I know we haven't always had the easiest relationship," and which I read twice and then did not respond to. At the 28-day mark, Nolan called to say they were going to list the condo and find somewhere more affordable. "That sounds like a good plan," I said. He waited, I think, for me to offer an alternative, to step in, to be the soft place I'd always been. I didn't. Stuart came over that evening and we grilled steaks in the backyard, two old men and an oak tree, and it was a warm August night, and I found that I was not as sad as I'd expected to be. I was something else, something that took me most of dinner to identify. It was relief. Not relief that I'd hurt my son. I hadn't wanted to hurt him, and I didn't feel satisfied about any of the hard parts, but relief that I had finally stopped pretending that the money was helping, pretending that the calls were real connection rather than financial transactions, pretending that a $42,000 ring had anything to do with love. I spoke with Ms. Nakamura about restructuring some of my assets. A few months earlier, I'd been considering selling one of my rental properties, a small commercial unit in Hamilton that had been more trouble than it was worth for a couple of years. I sold it. The proceeds went into a registered account. I started thinking for the first time in years about what I actually wanted, not what I owed, not what I was supposed to do, what I wanted. I wanted to take a trip to Cape Breton. My wife and I had always meant to go and never made it. I wanted to fix the back fence and get a dog, maybe. I wanted to have my brother over for dinner more often without the low hum of financial anxiety that had been underneath everything for so long I'd stopped hearing it as anxiety and just thought it was how life felt. I heard from Nolan once more before the end of the year, a short call around Thanksgiving. He was civil, careful. He told me they'd moved into a rental in Mississauga. He did not thank me for anything, and he did not apologize. He asked if we could start fresh, and I said yes, that I was willing to do that, but that it was going to be a different kind of relationship than what we'd had before. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means I'm your father," I said, "not your bank." He was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said finally. I didn't know if that was the beginning of something real or just another surface. Maybe he didn't know either. These things take time. People take time. I know from my own life that real change is slow and unannounced. It doesn't come with a speech. It just quietly shows up one day in the small decisions you make, differently than you used to. But I also knew this. I couldn't do the changing for him. I'd tried that. It didn't work. I booked the Cape Breton trip in January, 2 weeks, a small inn near the Cabot Trail, a rental car with no particular itinerary. Stuart came with me. We drove along that coastline in early June, the ocean ridiculous and enormous on one side of us and the highlands on the other, and I thought about my father who came over from Scotland and worked his hands raw so I could have more than he had. And I thought about how I'd tried to give my son more than I had, and how somewhere along the way more had come to mean everything, without effort, without question. That's not what my father gave me. What he gave me was harder and better than that. The evening we stopped at a lookout point above the Cabot Trail, the water going gold and silver in the last of the light. Stuart leaned on the railing beside me and said, "Your dad would have liked this." "He would have complained about the wind," I said. Stuart laughed. "Yeah, and then he would have liked it." We stood there a while. The wind came off the water, and it was cold for June, but neither of us moved. I had a son who might find his way and might not. I had a brother who showed up every time without being asked. I had a house with an oak tree in the backyard and a long fence that needed fixing and the phone number of a good lawyer and, for the first time in a very long time, a clear sense of what my own life was supposed to feel like. That felt like enough, more than enough, honestly. It felt like mine. I've been sitting with this story long enough now that I can see it clearly, not just what happened, but why it happened. And the honest answer is uncomfortable. I built the conditions for all of it, one quiet yes at a time. When Nolan was young, I told myself that giving him everything was love, and some of it was. But somewhere along the way, love got tangled up with guilt, and with loneliness after his mother passed, and with the very human need to feel needed. I kept the money flowing because it kept him close. I knew that on some level. I just didn't want to look at it directly. That's not a character flaw unique to me. I've talked to enough people my age to know it's common, but common doesn't mean harmless. What I was doing, what I told myself was generosity, was actually preventing my son from ever having to develop the one thing that matters most in a person's life, the ability to stand on his own and do hard things without a safety net. I robbed him of that, not maliciously, but consistently and for years. There's a kind of honesty that costs something. Not the easy honesty of telling other people what they're doing wrong, but the harder kind, looking at your own choices and naming them accurately. I wasn't just a generous father. I was also a father who was afraid of losing my son the way I'd lost his mother, afraid that if I stopped being useful, I'd stop being loved. That fear made me weak in exactly the moments I should have been strong. What Nolan needed from me, what any child actually needs from a parent, wasn't money. It was a model, a demonstration of what it looks like to work for something, to fail and keep going, to make decisions based on values rather than comfort. My father gave me that without thinking twice about it. He didn't have the luxury of giving me much else, and I turned out better for it than I understood at the time. What I hope for Nolan, and I do still hope for him that hasn't changed, is that this becomes the beginning of something real for him. Not the end of our relationship, but the end of the version of it that wasn't working for either of us. Real respect between two people can't be bought. It has to be built, the same way anything worth having is built, slowly, through effort, through showing up when it's inconvenient, through doing the right thing even when no one is watching. I'm 63 years old and I'm still learning that. Maybe that's the most honest thing I can say. The Cape Breton coastline, the wind off the water, Stuart beside me, not saying much. That felt more like love than any check I ever signed, because it was freely given and freely received with nothing owed on either side. That's what I want the rest of my life to feel like.